again for who are here today, so we won't do that. But we do have the emergency procedures on the screen. Please take a note of those. If you can make sure your phone is switched to silent mode, and of course use your microphone. And I believe we have everyone here who's going to be here today in person. Moving through to apologies. So I have received an apology from Councillor Briggs for illness. So I believe we've got everyone else. So I'll move an apology be accepted for Councillor Briggs. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parkin. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Public comment. Don't believe we have any members of the public who wish to speak. So we will now move through to conflict of interest declarations. No conflicts to declare. Moving through to item 5, which is Water Services Delivery Plan and Delivery Model. And this is on page 8 of your agenda. Our Chief Executive, Joe Miller, will speak to this item. And we also have Dougal List, if you'd like to come forward, who will be here to make some brief comments and answer any questions as well, alongside our Chief Executive. So, Joe, I'll pass it over to you.
Kia ora tātou, Mayor and councillors. It's a lengthy report, but it's a big decision in a series of decisions that you're going to be asked to make. And the purpose of this one is to seek agreement from you to continue along a path that's set out to develop a water services delivery plan based on a proposed joint regional asset owning water services CCO. And if that's, so we're asking you to stay in that regional programme at the moment that has been set up, and the report sets out how, when that was set up, and you've been briefed and you've seen the various gates we've gone through. If you are minded to do that, then our next steps would be to consult early next year on 2 options. Those options would be the existing model, which is in effect our status quo, a non-asset owning model, and the one that we are suggesting is preferred, which is this asset owning water services CCO. And that as we go out to consultation, albeit you'll be confirming this later, but we'll be preparing the consultation material on this basis, that the joint regional asset owning water services delivery model would be our preferred option for consultation. And you will see that the report at paragraph 12 identifies what options there are, and you will see the table beneath that specifically sets out the advantages and disadvantages of both a water model that doesn't own assets and a water model that does own assets. You'll see that there are a number of reasons. There are other models, and there are a number of reasons why we're not considering them. We're not considering going it alone because you haven't gone alone for 20 years. So going backwards, we're not suggesting is the answer, nor are we considering a trust or any of the other models. These 2 we suggest are the most practical. You'll see that there is further legislation to come through that will, but nonetheless, the current legislation requires us to formally consider which service delivery model is required as part of developing that water services delivery plan, which we'll need to have in place by August next year. You might say to me, well, there are 10 other councils in this model at the moment. What if some of them are in or out? And I'm asking you to note that we don't have any control as to which others sign up. We know that Wellington this morning confirmed that they are staying in, and we certainly believe that urban Wellington, if you like, will confirm they're staying in. We don't know what the Wairarapa will consider, and it may well be that places like the Wairarapa and indeed Kapiti and Horowhenua may decide to go beyond the 2 models that we are putting here. You will see that in the report we talk about decisions that we need to think about later on. So at the moment, all of the modelling, and this report is about models, it's not about actuals, based on a keep-up, maintenance, catch-up on backlogs, build-up capacity for future growth, and especially relevant to us here, clean-up in relation to our failures around discharge standards through upgrades being very important. What we aren't doing in here is saying this will be the financial profile, this is what the funding model looks like, this is what the price path looks like. They will be models that they will be matters that we need to get to, but right now we're asking you to commit to be in this regional model so that we can go to consultation. In terms of engagement, that's going to be at the very earliest, the end of the year, probably more likely the start of next year, given that some councils won't be indicating their preference until the end of November. We will be coordinating because people across the region will be hearing very similar messages at the same time. And it's going to be important to the public in relation to engaging with decision making and understanding that assets that were no longer under our control will be like, what that might look like. So common messaging is going to be critical. You all know, and I don't need to say it, that the current model doesn't work. Whilst you're probably better than you would have been by being in the Wellington water situation we're in, the fact is that at an investment level, it hasn't worked. And the new water service delivery model will have the ability to fund it up to 500% of revenue, and indeed borrow over an extended life period for its assets. So there are some opportunities to make things significantly better as we move forward. So I won't say much more, I don't think, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot of noting for you to approve here, noting the framework through local government, through local water done well, noting that the government will be bringing in further legislation. As I said, noting that we've had 10 councils in so far. We don't know how many will remain in it. But even if it's only 2 or 3 of us, our recommendation would be marginal. We recommend as the preferred option to move forward. And Bruce would be recommending that if he wasn't in Australia with his grandchildren. So just to assure you, I haven't taken him out of the way to put this in front of you. And you will receive, I say in the future, reports around debt and how we manage debt and how we manage with residual finances in the council. That's through the Ramsey debt review, which is coming to the oversight group at the end of this week, and we'll be reporting in here at the next phase, and a peer review of the financial modelling that's contained in this report has been done by Castalia, and that will also be coming to you at a future date. You don't need them to make the decisions you need to make today. You will need to understand those before you go out to consultation. So if you look at the financial modelling in here, you will see that some of it looks like it goes up and then it reaches a path and comes down. Don't worry about that. It's simply a financial model to enable us to compare apples with apples. A real funding and financing option will be part of the decision making that you need to do to get to your water services delivery plan for consultation. Today, you're confirming your direction of travel to move forward with the 2 options that we're suggesting. And I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Dougal, do you want to make any comments before we open up for questions? Okay, questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I had a couple, and I don't think they will impact our decision today, but I'll ask them anyway. Dougal, I don't know if you have the detail. In the proposal document, it talks about the average price per connection across the region being just over $1,700, noting that that may go up to over $4,000 and then come back down again. But do we know what the average price per connection is for Hutt City as opposed to the region?
I couldn't answer that, but there may be a question that your CFO is better placed to answer than I.
I guess if we don't know it now, we will have it before we go out to
Apologies,
consult.
we have got it. I just haven't got it with me now, so I can follow up and provide that to you.
Thank you. The other financial question I had was about the financial support from councils, which is mentioned in various places. It's explained that it means either a guarantee or uncalled capital will be required from councils to match the liabilities of the water CCO. How is it that we deliver that level of guarantee or uncalled capital given the huge amounts of money that these entities are going to be able to borrow?
And that's a joint and several call potentially on a guarantee. So in terms of the totality of that, that's going to be something we're going to need to work through with the LGFA, a local government funding agency. Sorry, it's awful when Office of Speaking acronyms, and we'll have Crown infrastructure partners also to support us in that, in terms of what debt structuring might look like, what revenue recover will look like, and what the implications of those guarantees might look like. But the reality is, in effect, the banks will be looking for the lender of last resort, and ultimately it's councils and government, one way or the other.
So it's up to us to come up with a model that will satisfy that this is covered.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I had a question around the 3-year price differential lock-in. As I understand it, this council decided to get on with investing in, this backlog that we had, and, this was reflected in us putting in more rates funding and certainly more debt funding. Does that put us as a disadvantage with this 3-year lock-in that, so we'll keep paying at those higher rates, maybe other councils don't, or do we sort of continue to get the benefit of that extra investment in the first 3 years of the operation of the CCO, if that's the way it goes?
So this has been a common area of questioning from councillors, particularly around the issue of cost to serve and cost between different council areas. So it's something that we've retested with DIA to make sure we are aligned with policy decisions, so that there is no requirement for harmonisation of prices, and it is entirely up to councils how they set that pricing structure with the new entity to reflect cost to serve, and will be something that the Commerce Commission looks at as well as part of a future economic framework. So if costs are set at a certain level for Hutt City at the moment, and there is a differential lock-in period for 3 years, because of that cost to serve principle, it should not put your people at a disadvantage. In fact, it could potentially put them at an advantage in that you'll be effectively a little bit ahead of the game in terms of future costs relative to other parts of the regional area.
If I may add to that, Mr Mayor, the other point is you recall that there was some debate nationally, whether people could see water reform coming. Do they go heavy on their LTP or do they go light on their LTP? You chose to do the right thing by the residents of this city in terms of what you were doing. So NewCo is going to start with the investment plans that are currently there. So you have a high level of investment for which the revenue cover is there in terms of charging. What NewCo won't do is say, well, we'll lock in that pricing for 3 years, but the things that sit beneath it around the plan, that's all changed. So in that sense, you're going to get what you pay for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Don't mind, there's something that you said. Did you say that at this stage, if we go for this model, no decision has been made on ultimate price harmonisation?
So one of the key principles that we've put forward as part of the regional model is that it'll be based on cost to serve, and so there is no intent for a harmonisation across the region. There are around about 200 different price points, as I understand, of various differentials across the regional area. You as a city charge slightly different tariffs depending on residential and commercial users. So the entity will need the ability to do some degree of harmonisation so that it has a reasonable number of different differential points. But the intent is to lock in those differentials for the first 3 years, but then to move towards a basis where cost to the user is based on what it costs to provide that service. So if it costs X in the Hutt City and Y in the Horowhenua, then that's the difference that people would pay.
Okay, Councillor Brown, then Councillor Stallinger.
If we are to move into the entity and we will not have the same level of council oversight on behalf of our Tawa Kairangi constituents, how will we have a level of consumer bottom line agreement or commitment that we have now? How will we keep that commitment of transparency and so forth on behalf of the consumers in the new entity?
So under the regional model, it is a different role of the council in that you become shareholders with more of a governance oversight, accountability through the statement of expectations and setting of board membership and review of the performance of the entity. The new entity would be subject to considerable regulatory oversight from the Commerce Commission, which has an accountability around consumer protection, quality of service and price. And so its role is to help ensure that users, consumers, the people, receive good quality service for a fair price in a transparent manner. So it's a very important part of the new framework, is that role of the Commerce Commission.
So in that model, if it's under the consumer protection, they go through, if they're unhappy with that level of service, they need to go through Commerce Commission. Is that the standard consumer protection process that any group would go to, or individual, if they're unhappy? There's not going to be a set one for the water entity like a consumer charter that is across the councils that we can agree to.
Probably two issues raised there. One is that we don't know some of the detail of this framework because it will come through in the third bill that we're expecting to land in December. So we will see some more detail around economic regulation and what that means for consumer protection, price and quality as that bill lands. It was raised this morning at Wellington City Council that perhaps some form of consumer protection mechanism is required as well. So that could be part of the framework that is moving forward, is developed as part of the regional model also.
We do have an additional recommendation to consider around that particular point as well. Councillor Stellinger?
There's two questions, if I may. The first one is along similar lines to Councillor Edwards, and the response there was quite helpful, but if I could just explore that a little more, because I was actually looking at it from the opposite angle, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I may not have quite picked this up correctly, but my understanding was that currently we certainly have increased very substantially our investment into water services, but we have not picked up the large increases in operating costs in our rates. In other words, the operations are being partly funded by debt. I don't see a nod, so maybe I got that wrong. But, well, that's my first question. Is that the case? So if we would be passing across to the new entity revenue, which was well short of what was required to fund the operations of our water services here.
Yes, I can confirm that's correct, because remember, we're running an overall deficit, and part of that deficit is basically being funded from debt.
Okay, thank you. So then my question really is, what impact will that have? I'm just envisaging that will mean once the 3 years is up, we're going to need a very substantial increases in the water charges.
I think that's a good example and speaks to the point that Joe's made, that at this point, our economic modelling is focused on the level of investment that's required in the network and understanding of what the operational costs of a new entity would be. The next phase of work really does need to look more closely at how do we balance the increases in cost that will be needed to cover the full cost of delivering water services, and how you balance that with price increases and trying to keep those as affordable as possible through long-term debt and financing. So that's the next phase of work really, is to kind of continue to iteratively test the level of investment that's required, when that happens, how that's funded through price to the user, and how that's funded through debt and finance, and how we manage all three of those together.
A second question unrelated to that one is on page 15 and paragraphs 37 and 38. I just found the comment on paragraph 38 surprising, because 37 says a go-alone option indicates the long-term cost to consumers would be about 30% higher than the proposed regional model. And then it goes on to say this analysis is in line with the work that was carried out by DIA under the former government water reform policy. My recollection is that it's vastly different from the advice which was coming through then. which was that a go-alone option would be 2 to 3 times as expensive rather than just 30% more expensive. So I'm wondering if that's a correct statement in paragraph 38.
I suppose the key point is that it's more expensive to go it alone versus the combined, more efficient regional model is the key point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't consider it to be in line. I think it should be noted that it's actually vastly different. But we're talking billions of dollars of difference over the next 10 years between the two models, or the two sets of advice, I should say.
I think part of that as well depends on how many people, how many organisations end up in the proposed regional model. By definition, I think we're suggesting that the greater the number of participants in the regional model, the greater the cost efficiency will be. And so it may well be that that number is significantly different when we come back to you after this. Does that help, Councillor Stallinger?
I just don't think the statement is correct. That's all.
Have you got a page number? Sorry.
15.
15.
Just to say, I don't think it really goes to my view on the motions before us, but I just thought it was something that wasn't accurate in the report, and so I thought it's worth noting that if the council agrees. I did have, just on that note, I did have one other question, and that was on relating to paragraph 37 there. I'm not quite sure why the comparison is to a go-alone option anyway, given that we're not really considering that.
Yeah.
And not to, the Wellington water model.
Yeah, you're correct. It's not what we're considering in this paper, but it's the only economic modelling that we've got in the current form. So the analysis that was done was basically this overall regional model, and this is just for the economic modelling piece of work, and then a standalone. So hence the comment there.
Yeah, if I can briefly. So we don't have a figure for the difference between the current model and the proposed new regional model?
Sorry, the Wellington water model? No, because we wouldn't be comparing apples with apples. It's a, completely different setup. The current budgeting aspects that we've got in the Wellington water, we're obviously not fully investing to fix all the assets. We've got limited investment there. So in paragraph 37, that modelling is really just comparing the total investment program that's recommended off the back of the work done by Gravel Works as a regional entity versus just Hutt City Council on our own. Those two aspects comparing each other, and the pricing off that is at 30% difference.
Okay, I was Councillor Parkin, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Dyer.
Kia ora. Thank you for the report. So we're on page 37 of the report, page 52 of our agenda. Figure 3, the challenge, currently only is talking about the cost to replace the worn-out net part of our network. How are we going about incorporating the assets that need to be built, but we don't currently have built in this process and plan? I'm just particularly thinking stormwater, that we've had indications that we're looking at over $1 billion of investment needed in Lower Hutt only, and it doesn't seem to be part of the planning at this point.
I'm happy to bring in others. As I said, the model's predicated on keeping up, maintenance, catching up on the backlog of renewals, building up as in capacity for growth, and then cleaning up, which is the point I think you're making around where we are failing on our standards, and have a significant need for upgrade, for example, in storm and wastewater. So that is predicated within the model around how those assets work.
Councillor
Kia
Moore.
ora. Thank you. Look, I just had three key things that came through from the report, and thank you for all the work that's gone in. It's fantastic. And I know we're looking at big picture right now with this potential model, but communication, and I know it's already been stated, so I'll just highlight that is going to be a huge piece in this operation to be smooth and efficient. Customer services, and sort of concur with Councillor Brown. How are we looking after our customers? Because no matter what, it will be part of our everyday business, actually, even though it's separated from us somewhat, so how are we looking after them? But the last point I'd just like to raise, even though we're not at that detail yet, but it will happen very quickly, I believe, is that localism, and are we employing our local businesses, our local talent, getting the pipes from here, all of those things, because I think the more that we can invest in our space, I think that's going to ensure a more robust model as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. So thank you.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Stellinger's question around the price difference. I think the question was more comparing the Wellington Water type model rather than the status quo model with the regional one. Do we have those numbers yet? And is that going to form part of our consultation?
Yeah, as mentioned previously, there's still a lot of work to do to work through the details of the financial modelling for consultation. So we've only got this really basic economic modelling that's been done at this stage and is included in this paper, but there's a big chunk of work still to be done, which will flesh out that pricing and further options. Yeah, so we don't have the Wellington Water information either.
And that'll be before we go up for consultation? Okay,
Correct,
cool.
yeah.
And it'll come to us to sign off to go out for consultation, etc.
Absolutely.
Yep,
We've
cool,
got to
okay.
get comfortable with the numbers that we're representing to our community.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my other questions were around consultation, but they can wait then. And then the other question I had was, currently we know through the Hutt Valley Shared Services Committee, it's legislated the arrangements we have with Upper Hutt. I'm assuming somewhere along the line that legislation will get changed. Is that on the radar of the team that currently us and Upper Hutt have to own Seaview together? And unless that legislation changes to say the rest of the region can own it as well, it's something that's come through the committee before when we've looked at the committee's purpose and we've been told, no, you have to keep this committee because it's legislated, this committee exists for Seaview. Obviously that will change as a result of this. So.
Yeah. We'd basically work with DRA to get the required legislative change, I'd expect, if we do go down the new CCO route.
Okay, so a couple of hands over here. No. Just one comment I would make is that I don't think we're ever going to get to a position where we can all say, hand on heart, we're 100% comfortable with the numbers that we're putting out there to our community. So I think the way I look at this is more from a principle point of view of what does the modelling, what does the evidence show us of in principle, the best way to go to deliver the infrastructure that we need at the most affordable price. And I think that's why, certainly from my point of view, that scale is a big part of it. So I suppose I just want, while the team will be doing everything they can to get as much information as they possibly can to us, I just don't want people to feel as if they're going to have the silver bullet of exactly what will be the case moving forward.
Mr. Mayor, can I comment as well? As I said, the work in here that has been done by Gravel Road has been peer reviewed by Castalia. I received a presentation on what they're likely to say at the end of last week. Their report is not yet here. It's due to go to the advisory oversight group at the end of this week. However, what I can tell you is that it does confirm what is in here, which the statement that a regional model at scale is most likely to be the most cost efficient, albeit that it will show, when we get the report, it will give us some more detail to help inform those future directions. But rest assured, there's nothing that's going to send you the other way in terms of the information in the report.
Okay. Any final questions before we go to the recommendations? Councillor Stellinger, on your point, are you happy for us to seek some clarification, particularly from Bruce, on those paragraphs, given we're not noting those particular items? Yep. Okay. Very good. Okay, so we'll move through to the recommendations which are in front of us. That is 1 through to 11. And what we'll do is also put an additional recommendation up on the screen. 2 recommendations covering. This is in regards to a consumer charter. So it is agrees the council considers a consumer charter an important design element of a new water entity, and agrees that the high-level principles of a consumer charter should be agreed upon by the shareholder councils in iwi to pass to the new entity to finalise within the context of the new economic regulatory framework. So that's acknowledging that there is obviously still more water to go under the bridge when it comes to the economic regulator, and this is something that the AOG can pick up. I can say that Wellington City Council has passed something similar in their recommendations today, and I know that Porirua City Council will be considering something similar to this as well, as will be Upper Hutt, I believe. So it's not, will certainly not be a shock to anyone for us to be considering that particular item. So I'll move all the recommendations, including 12 and 13 as additional recommendations. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Tupou. Any discussion? Councillor Stallinger.
I'm happy to support the recommendations as well. By the work to date, it's been very thorough, and take confidence from the responses to the questions and just the work that's going on. So, I think we're heading in the right direction. It's a tough situation we're in, but we've got to make the best of it, and I think this is the way to do it. Yep. So, thanks to all those involved.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Dye.
I know we're not signing off the consultation today, that will come, but it does feel a little bit like deja vu, going back 5 years or so when DIA presented similar, not as in-depth information, but definitely similar problem statements and how to get past it. And everyone was on board at that stage, and then the will of the people was lost through the way that it was consulted on, and ultimately we know what's happened with the previous reform. So yeah, I just can't stress enough how important it is for whether it's us leading it or the region leading it, that the consultation with the people was done so perfectly, because we can't afford to go back and do a third reform in another 5 years' time. We absolutely just need to get on and fix these issues.
You have a comment, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate all the officers who have worked on this, and what a difficult task it is ahead. I think even with the best consultation in the world, we're trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So I think the challenge is to try and get the best standards for consumers, but this is a really tough environment and really tough parameters to try and make something happen, with the need is far, far greater than what even as a joint CCO entity will be able to grapple with. So I just say, all the best to the people that are working on it, and that we do the very best we can. But I think even with the, most precise consultation with the public, we still have a huge mountain to get through to deliver safe, water to households.
Any other? Oh, Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just the other thing that comes through from this for me is being really upfront with our residents that even under this option and all of the scenarios there are significant increases in water costs coming their way, doubling or tripling over a prolonged period of time before we get anywhere near a sustainable price for water, which is still more than we're paying currently. Just I hope that message gets through to our residents, that they aren't expecting that this is an easy solution and that rates rises aren't going to be as high, or whatever it is, that they're going to be paying less for water somehow, because that is certainly not the case under any of these scenarios.
Any other comments? Councillor Mitchell, you absolutely stole the words out of my mouth. I think it's going to be very important for us to say it's going to cost more for water in our community. It's just a case of how much more, and that will depend on obviously which option and which path we go down. So I think you're absolutely right that needs to be part of our material and our explanation to our community. And while I'd like to say we could, I'd love for us to be able to nail perfectly a consultation process. It's still going to be a challenge just generally in getting the engagement of our people, and particularly when it comes to these high level, lots of numbers, quite complicated to get engagement from people. So that's going to be important that we do all we possibly can. But I think that at the same time, we need to be really clear in the direction we're looking to go in with this. And I do think that a lot of people do put their faith and confidence in us to be steering that ship in the right direction as well, which I think we are when we look at a regional model and working with these reforms. But all very relevant points made by everyone. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. We'll now move through to item 6. Thank you, Dougal. Appreciate your work. 2 from 2. Item 6, draft meeting schedule for 2025. This is on page 179 of the agenda. We've got Kate here to answer any questions if you have any. Any questions from anyone? No? Happy with that? Okay, so I'll move the recommendations, which we are adopting the meeting schedule and agreeing to the venues and agreeing to the commencement time of 2 p.m. And the other noting recommendations. So 1 through to 6, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Moving through to item 7, which is recommendation to Council from the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee from the 14th of October. I'd like to invite Councillor Mitchell as Chair to say a few words.
Just as I lost my page in diligent there, happy to move the recommendations that have been brought forward from the committee.
Great. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Stallinger. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. And we also have recommendation to Council from the Councillor Mitchell's meeting of just moments ago. So what I'll do is move that Council adopts the recommendations made in relation to the Hutt City Council's annual report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dyer. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Questions? I've received no questions, so we'll go to exclusion of the public. Exclusion of the public. So I'll move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings, namely item 11, Rico Sports Centre procurement process, and we just will have Andrew Howie from Building Intelligence Group, who will remain along with the appropriate relevant officers as well. So I will I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried.